Hi, I'm Robin Haney. I'm the conservator for the Utah Museum of Fine Arts. One of the things that's really great about shortwave infrared imaging is that it's a non-destructive analytical technique. So we can look at the artworks and we can get a better understanding of what's below them without actually having to do anything to the piece themselves. Conservators use many of the different wavelengths of light to look at art. We use ultraviolet light, visible light, and sometimes infrared light, like with this project. One of the things that's great about this is that we can see different types of changes in the artwork over time. We can see underdrawings, particularly if they're made in charcoal or graphite, less so if they have red crayon. We can also see when works were treated over time. So sometimes we can better read inscriptions or surface details using the contrast provided by shortwave infrared imaging. So it's been really helpful with the Egyptian sarcophagus to see a little bit more the different details on the surface, despite maybe not seeing as much underneath the paint.
Hi, my name is Kurt Devanch. I'm an applications engineer at Sensors Unlimited, which is a Collins aerospace company, and we specialize in shortwave infrared imaging. The camera that we're using, the shortwave infrared camera, gives a very accurate representation of what these paintings look like in the shortwave infrared wavelengths of light. This camera operates a lot like a black and white visible camera would. It doesn't distinguish between wavelengths within the shortwave infrared, but it does show the difference in light intensity, where there's darker areas represent more absorption of shortwave infrared light, and brighter areas represent more reflectance of shortwave infrared light. That's why the shortwave infrared image is black and white. So why is it that the paintings look so different? Somewhat muddied looking, somewhat out of focus looking. And the reason for that is that each layer of paint on top of the canvas is semi-transparent to infrared light. So think of it in terms of different colored windows stacked on top of each other. Each layer of window will reduce the sharpness of the image that you're seeing because you're seeing through so many different layers.
Hi, I'm Leslie Anderson. I'm a curator of European American Regional Art at the Utah Museum of Fine Arts. John White Alexander's portrait of Miss Maud Adams in a theatrical guise, that of Napoleon II, in a play in which she performed beginning in October of 1900, shows the figure silhouetted on the stage. If we look at this particular image in an archival photograph in the artist's studio around this period of fall 1900, winter 1900, and 1901, we can see that there is a lot of gestural brushwork that he's later tamed, but possibly this archival photograph does not filter out infrared. So it provides kind of the same access to the process that, that infrared imaging today would. You might note that John White Alexander has tailored, if you will, her riding coat to suit her. He's reduced it a bit on the length and brought it in at its sides. The John White Alexander piece portraying Maud Adams is a piece that shows some change over time and actually some repairs where the work was treated historically that are less visible to the naked eye in visible light. The study Head of a Man, possibly attributed to Peter Paul Rubens, is a really great example of when we can see the support underneath the paint layers of an object. Understanding more about how that panel and that support is functioning is really important to conservation in terms of the decisions we'll make going forward about how to treat that work. Shortwave infrared imaging can also allow us to better identify the author of a work and might buttress information that we have that would lead to an attribution. So as an example, we have a study head of a man by what is very possibly Peter Paul Rubens, but right now we say conservatively it's by an unidentified Flemish artist. It entered the collection as a work by Anthony van Dyck. But very recently, we've been in contact with the Rubenianum in Antwerp, and they have suggested that their file on this particular object leads it, as well as in terms of the style, to the hand of Peter Paul Rubens. So beneath these layers of paint, we get a sense of the support of the object. and it is a wooden support, a panel painting. You can see the growth of tree rings, and there's a whole kind of subfield specialization called dendrochronology that could help you to better date this particular object and perhaps gain some insight into the work's author if it happens to be aligned with other known works by Peter Paul Rubens. The depiction of St. John the Baptist by the Master of Santa Maria de la Hoz is it's one part of a much larger altarpiece or retablo. And what we see is an enlarged figure, in this case, St. John the Baptist, delivering the announcement, "Behold the Lamb of God." In shortwave infrared imaging, we can reveal many compositional changes. So in the upper right of the image, there is a castle that's been concealed by the artist. And at lower left, there's a diminutive gentleman in contemporary dress. These particular elements definitely situate this particular scene of a biblical figure in the here and now. And that corresponds to the very naturalistic depiction of the environment. It would have been a perfect, relatable source for a devotional image. But it's possible that it also links to the coat of arms of the patron of the particular work. So this work was commissioned for a family chapel in Segovia by Esteban de la Hoz, and he was a representative of the Catholic Church in Rome. In his coat of arms at lower center, you see the Tower of Castile. You also see a sickle at left. It's possible that the castle in the background at upper right is a reference to his family's coat of arms. Castile was named for the abundance of castles in that particular region, and the figure at lower left appears to be a laborer. We don't know this for sure, but it certainly gets us thinking about all of the possible reasons that it may have initially been included and then concealed, perhaps just relying on the information provided in the coat of arms at lower center. The Ambush of Captain Alan McLean by James Peale is perhaps one of three, and perhaps the last of three, versions of this particular subject that James Peale executed between 1803 and 1813. The event was the attack of this Revolutionary War captain by 2 British dragoons. He is quickly dispatched with them, and more are on the way. Having painted out the figure immediately following Captain Alan McLean, he has simplified the composition, and perhaps this is one of many decisions that James Peale made in consideration of its possible audience. This particular work or version of the painting had been intended for display at the Peale Museum in Philadelphia and was meant to be instructive, to educate the public. And so it's very likely that James Peale was trying to be a little bit more faithful to the account, while at the same time making it easy to read for a general population. The painting that's now known as The Roma Camp by Dan Wegeland depicts merrymaking and music making in an area that is very likely on the outskirts of Salt Lake City. We know that in August 1875, a journalist for the Salt Lake Tribune wrote about a Roma encampment in southeastern Salt Lake City. And it seems as if Wegeland's picture closely follows the description in this particular newspaper article. In this image, through shortwave infrared imaging, we see that Wegeland has very judiciously removed a horse and some chickens. He's later introduced a couple in the background at far right, following the path to this group. And then he's also removed the instrument that the young girl in the foreground plays. She was previously playing a triangle, it would seem. There is, of course, a gentleman to the left with his back to her, but with his head engaged and directed toward the viewer, as well as a girl seated to the fiddler's right and another man behind the tent. Now, we know that Wegeland included this particular painting in the 1876 Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition. So thinking of this work as an exhibition picture, he was certainly refining it and ensuring that it was comprehensible and really kind of met his very high criterion for picture making.